Awesome! But what are all these stones piled all around?
These are the remains of the fortress of Sfat, called the Mitsudah. It was built by the Crusaders over 900 years ago. They conquered the land from the hands of the Muslims. When they realized the strategic importance of the site, they began to fortify it by first building a fortress. The war between the Muslims and the Crusaders dragged on for more than 160 years, each time one side winning and gaining control over the other side.
But this fortress doesn't look that big or important.
Yes, hard to believe, but it was the biggest fortress in the East during that period of time. Now we only see a small part of it, but we know that it once spread over 10 acres.
Wow, that's like 8 football fields.
Yes, and it was surrounded by a 30-meter-high wall stretching over 850 meters. And along the wall there was a moat, 15 meters deep.
And with Templar knights standing guard inside, for sure no one could conquer it.
Not exactly. A few years after the Crusaders completed the fortress, an army of Muslim Mamluks led by Sultan Beavers came from Egypt and conquered the land of Israel from the Crusaders. Beavers arrived here in 1266, but failed to conquer the Mitsudah. In the end, he signed an agreement with the knights of the fortress that they would not be harmed if they surrendered. Only then he was able to gain control over the fortress.
Yes, but he cheated them, and they were executed following their surrender.
You are right, and because of this, the Muslims were able to gain control over the country for more than 650 years. Then the region came under British occupation when they took it from the hands of the Turks during World War I. But wars weren't the only problems Sfat faced. It suffered also from many earthquakes.
That's right. In 1837, there was a horrible earthquake that completely destroyed the whole town. The Mitsudah was destroyed too. The residents of Tzfat rebuilt their homes using stones from the fortress. This is why we can hardly see any remains left from the original fortress. Hey Mom, you haven't said anything about the Jewish population in Tzfat. Were there any Jews living in Tzfat?
Absolutely. There were always Jews living in Tzfat. It is one of the 4 cities in Israel considered holy for the Jewish people. In the 16th century, following the Turkish occupation of the country and the Jewish expulsion from Spain, Tzfat became a center for the whole Jewish world.
So this must be the period of the Ari, founder of the Kabbalah, Rabbi Joseph Karu, writer of Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Shlomo El-Kabetz, writer of Lecha Dodi, and many others from our Jewish heritage.
But Tzfat also endured periods of epidemics, persecutions, poverty, and violence during that time. The conflict between the Jewish and Arab population was continually escalating. During the 1929 riots, 18 Jewish residents were killed. The harsh conditions of life in Tzfat brought a decline of the Jewish population in the town. On the eve of the War of Independence in 1948, only 2,000 Jews were left in Tzfat, compared to 10,000 Arabs.
Did they really believe that they could stay and confront the Arab majority?
Of course. These real Tzfatniks with deep roots, and despite being a minority, organized and made the preparations for the war they knew was imminent. The commander of the town, Meir Meivar, built a fighting force that included 300 fighters, including youngsters, women, and the elderly.
You can't forget to include that there was a unique cooperation in Tzfat between the underground forces of the Haganah, Etzel, and Lehi, which wasn't common in other places around the country. But there were British ruling in the country in that time. What was their role?
The British did not believe that the Jews even had a chance, so they proposed to evacuate the women and children from the town. They even organized buses for them. But the Jewish residents of Tzfat were determined to stay and fight, and not one person boarded a bus to leave. On April 16, 1948, the British left Tzfat, but not before letting the Arabs take control over the strategic posts. They took control over the local police station, the regional police station on Mount Canaan, and over the Mitsudah.
And then, a Palmel platoon headed by Elad Peled arrived to the town. The force entered the Jewish quarter singing the Palmach anthem. It was a moment of extreme excitement and relief for both the residents and the fighters.
It certainly was. And 2 weeks later, the Iftach operation, commanded by Yigal Alon, was launched. Its goal was to liberate the upper eastern Galilee. The 3rd Battalion of the Palmach took command over the fighting forces in Sfat. On the night of May 10, 1948, the decisive battle over Sfat started. The Palmach forces attacked in parallel both the police station and the Mitsudah. The shells from the Davidka, which was a primitive mortar cannon, shook the whole town and scared the Arabs to death. Under the cover of heavy artillery fire, the fighters were able to climb the steep slope of the Mitsudah and approach the Arab outposts. The battle was extremely difficult, but thanks to the courage of the fighters, they were able to conquer the hill. The battle over the local police station was difficult as well, but also concluded with our victory.
And what happened to the Arab population that lived here?
The day after the battle over the Mitsudah, the troops planned an attack into the Arab quarter. But when they entered, they found it empty. All Arab population, including the army forces, had fled out of town.
50 Jewish fighters lost their lives in the War of Independence in defense of Tzfat. They were the silver plate on which Jewish Tzfat was given to the newborn state of Israel.
So true. And this audio station was built in memory of Tova and Mordechai Zaira. Mordechai came to Sfat in the War of Independence in order to participate in its defense. After the war, Tova joined him, and together they built their home here and raised their 3 children.
They must have been special people. Thanks, Mom, for the opportunity to remember and listen to the amazing story of Tzfat.